Hi everybody, here's Krystian from Team Cast, and I'm here with a mini card review of Netrunner, of a Netrunner card. And this time around, I will be talking about Silhouette. I will be talking about the runner identity Silhouette. You get Silhouette in the Honor and Profit expansion, which is the second big box expansion focused on criminals and on Jinteki. Silhouette is a stealth operative with 0 link, not very stealthy if you think about this. She's a natural identity, and her ability is that the first time you make a successful run on HQ each turn, you may expose 1 card. And the flavor text, don't waste my time. Oh, and also very important, she has, her deck can be a minimum size of just 40 cards, which is unusual because there's usually 45 on there, so she can have literally small decks, 15 influence. Flavor-wise, Silhouette seems to be kind of like this, stealth operative. She kind of has this really nice suit that has glowy bits on it, science fiction kind of suit. Maybe she becomes invisible with it, we don't know. She is kind of like this ninja and, assassin kind of person. She's also a woman of color, which is very, very nice to see in, kind of like a nerdy science fiction scenario like this. I also feel like she's the first runner who's like really physically doing stuff. Like, I don't know, I felt like stuff like Andromeda or Gabe, those guys don't seem like they're actually out there doing stuff. They seem like they're just hanging around at a computer all day and hacking things. And she seems to be like somebody who actually gets into a corporation's building and hacks a corporation from within. So that's pretty cool. Flavor-wise, you will see her on the Planned Assault card and actually also on the box of Honor and Profit. That's the same artwork where she is doing something with some kind of holo interface, being badass about this. She might be also on Legwork, I'm not exactly sure. I think that's in Legwork, that's her in disguise. That's my theory about this, I'm not exactly sure again. She's also on Executive Wiretaps, doing this kind of like Mission Impossible thing, going through like ventilation shafts and being badass about it. And of course, her console that you see on the identity card is the kind of helmet that you have here is probably the Blackguard, which we're gonna talk about in a second. Also, one of the things is that she also looks like Rihanna. She walks like Rihanna. So I'm gonna be a bit honest about this. I'm gonna be a bit emotional about this. Silhouette is an identity that broke my heart. She broke my heart. I thought, because by the time she came out, Andromeda was the king, the queen of the criminals. Everybody was playing Andromeda. And I thought Silhouette has the tools, has the coolness to, to out Andromeda, at least be a good alternative to Andromeda. And that's just turned out not to be the case. Andromeda prevailed, while Silhouette is actually very, very difficult to get running, at least to make a very competitive deck with Silhouette. What Silhouette was supposed to be turned out to be actually Leela Patel. Leela turns out to be a good alternative to Andromeda and actually good competition to Andromeda, while Silhouette is there in the background doing nothing much. The reason why Silhouette seems so good initially is that she's actually seems to be very close to Chaos Theory. Both identities are those special 40 card identities with really, really small decks. Small decks allow you to have less cards in them, so the probability that you draw the cards that you want to have is higher. And that's also, of course, very important when you are doing competitive types of decks. Chaos Theory was very popular among competitive types of players, so I thought maybe Silhouette will also become a very popular competitive card. It turns out to be not the case. And the reason why Silhouette is so much difficult to build a deck around is that, with Chaos Theory, her ability actually feeds back into the 40 card limit. It's because Chaos Theory gets a MU for free. So a very simple way to build a Chaos Theory deck is to take a Kate deck and be like, alright, I already have the M1 MU, so I basically take all the cards that give me MU, here are 3 Akamatsu M chips, and I remove them, and then I just need to remove 2 more cards, and I'm down to 40 cards, and I have a viable Chaos Theory deck, in theory. Chaos Theory. Ha! Let's try the same thing with Silhouette. So we take a standard Andromeda deck and we remove all the expose. yeah, we still have to get rid of 5 cards. Because nobody seems to be playing Expose these days. Expose seems to be like this ability that a lot of expert players are looking down upon. Expose is often considered something that newcomers are playing because they're afraid of running on cards, they're afraid of face checking into ice. They can't anticipate what kind of stuff the corporation is playing, so they need to expose all the stuff in order to make informed decisions. And it's, there's this widespread belief that professional players can read the opponent much better, so they don't need to expose that Silhouette is giving them, and they don't need to expose that would be otherwise in a deck. And so, yeah, Silhouette doesn't seem to be doing any good for them. So, and the thing with Expose, it seems like Expose would be good against like horizontal decks that play a lot of traps, something like Jinteki, Personal Evolution, right? At the time where Silhouette came out, shortly after, like a very aggressive Personal Evolution type of deck become quite popular. So it would seem like Silhouette would be the kind of identity to play against this. You can expose all the cards, you can figure exactly where are the agendas, where are the snares, where are the, Cerebral Overwriter Ronin, stuff like that. And, only access the agendas with her. So that seems really awesome, right? But then FFG decided to release Psychic Field, and Psychic Field kind of killed Silhouette, sadly. So the idea with Psychic Field is that you play a Psy game, and if you lose the Psy game as a runner, you will lose all your cards. And Psychic Field triggers on expose effects as well, so you don't even have to exit it, it's enough to expose it. So my experience with playing Silhouette against Personal Evolution is that I would just lose a lot of cards to do the Psychic Field. And Silhouette has a tiny deck, and with Silhouette losing 5 cards from your hand is, you lose a huge percentage of your deck right there. And additionally, criminals don't really have a good way of recurring things, so if you lose something due to net damage, you have a really bad time. So I feel like Psychic Field was really a very unfortunate thing that, Expose was already not very popular, but Psychic Field really was the nail in the coffin to all Expose and to some extent to Silhouette. And again, Leela Patel turned out to be the thing that Silhouette was trying to do. She turned out to be very good against Personal Evolution, and the reason for it being that she doesn't expose cards, but she just bounces them back on their hand. So stuff like Psychic Field doesn't even matter. And the thing with the 40 card limit is that if you compare her efficiency or like her consistency to Andromeda, so Andromeda has 45 cards in her deck, right? But you draw 9 cards at the beginning. So once you have done your first draw, with Andromeda, there is 36 cards in your deck, right? And with Silhouette, there's 35 cards in your deck after you've drawn your 5 cards. So Andromeda actually, after you draw your cards, Andromeda has actually 1 more card in the deck than Silhouette. So they actually, consistency-wise, they seem to be actually quite close. So the huge advantage of Silhouette is actually not there at all, and her ability seems to be something that nobody needs. One kind of hope that was floating around before Silhouette came out was that Blackguard, her console, might turn, those two into like this unstoppable combo. Because, okay, Blackguard costs 11 credits to get out, but once you get it out, every card that gets exposed has to be rezzed. So the idea would be that you somehow get 11 credits, somehow you get all those credits out, you get Blackguards on the table, you play Silhouette, so then you run on HQ, you expose something, the corporation has to res it. They have no credits whatsoever, and then you can run on the place you wanted to run on with Silhouette. In practice, first of all, 11 credits is a lot of money, and if you get those 11 credits, then you still have to get your Breaker Suite and everything. Until then, the corporation has created like this fortress, and you are just looking at a sad Silhouette. And also, my experience with playing Blackguard Silhouette was that, alright, you can make corporation res everything. Then eventually they will res everything, and then you still need to get in those servers, and you already spent most of your economy on Blackguard, so you're like, okay, then you kind of need for stuff, you need cards that unrest thing, the de-rest thing, so you can keep doing this this kind of expose rest kind of stuff with her over and over again. And so far there seems not to be a lot of cards that do this, and especially those are a lot of cards that you need to add to your deck, and you only can have 40 of them. So it seems like her ability goes actually against the 40 card limit. You need a lot of tools to make her work with her exposed ability, but you can't have all those tools because you can only have 40 cards, or you should have only 40 cards. So this is a bit of a problem with Silhouette. One thing that some people added to the Blackguard deck was Snitch, which is a really interesting card that nobody ever played, which seems to be like some kind of training wheels for runners. Once per turn, you may expose an unrest piece of ice when you approach it, and then you may jack out. So together with this and Blackguard, of course, this was a cool combo because you could make people, make a corporation rest even more stuff because you're exposing even more stuff. But the thing I noticed very quickly is that actually you don't need Silhouette and you don't need Blackguard. Snitch itself is actually very cool because it allows you to face check everything safely and also, figure out what kind of breakers you need before you run on something. So actually, from this combo, the Snitch turned out to be actually the really good card, and the other ones turned out to be just That doesn't mean that Silhouette wasn't successful. In fact, there is this very famous deck that somebody constructed with Silhouette, that actually won a Star Championship, which was called Notorious Daily Quester. So the idea would be you take Silhouette, you take the 3 central breakers, which are very, very cheap to play. It's, the entire breaker suite for just 6 credits. That's sometimes you pay more for that for just 1 breaker, right? So you get the entire breaker suite of central breakers, you get Silhouette, and you get Quest Completed. So the idea would be that you just run on central servers, you have those breakers here to run on central servers. You can be very quick about this because you have your breaker suite out very quickly. You do a lot of pressure on central servers. If the corporation wants to exploit your weakness that you cannot use those breakers on remote servers, you can use her ability to expose a card that was installed in a remote server, possibly an agenda. If it is an agenda, you run on the other remotes, on the other central servers, and then you can play Quest Completed to access the card in a remote server, which is a really nice combo. And if somebody's not prepared for this, then it can be really devastating. Now, this worked for a while, but I think these days corporations are prepared. And the problem is, I tried to play this deck, but the problem I found personally, maybe I'm not used to this deck so well, was that it's very easy to corporation to make the central server runs very expensive, even though your breakers themselves to play them are not that expensive. Breaking stuff still costs a lot of money. So I found myself being in a situation where I wasn't sure if I was supposed to spend my money now to make central server pressure, or were I supposed to just lean back and wait for the corporation to play something on remote server. And of course, corporation would soon figure out how this works, and they would play, like, I don't know, Adonis campaigns in a remote server. And then I would waste my Quest Completed, or at least I would waste the money to run on a HQ just to expose an Adonis campaign. Generally, my lack of ability to run on remote servers would cause me a lot of trouble. So, for example, the corporation would install something like Sansan or something like Melange Mining Corp on the remote server, and there was no way for me to get to that very cheaply. I would have to waste the Quest Completed for this, and it was very difficult for me to make that kind of choice. So some thoughts about playing Silhouette anyway, maybe if you want to give it a try, maybe if you want to make her more viable. Obviously, one of the things you want to do with her is have a lot of HQ access, because that's when your ability triggers. So you want to probably have something like a Sneak or Better in there at least once to catch maybe like an unprepared corporation off guard and have plenty of HQ access. Sadly, her ability triggers only once per turn, so Sneak or Better will probably give you just 1 access. But just giving you one more venue into HQ is probably valuable and enough. The corporation will have to spend ice to res HQ and archives in order to lock you out. Another thing I think worth considering with Silhouette, I tried it myself, but it was a bit difficult to make it work, was Pheromone, something that you don't see these days very often, but I think it's a very nice card that gives you recurring credits for runs on HQ. The idea is that the card accumulates virus tokens every time you run an HQ, and then it has recurring credits in the amount of virus tokens. There is actually some important ways on how to handle those recurring credits on there. Maybe we have to do another video about pheromones to explain how this works. But yeah, pheromones and Silhouette might be working well together. Some other very obvious things to add to Silhouette is obviously something maybe like an HQ interface. That would be really nice, because then every time you trigger her ability, you also get to see a lot of cards, so that's pretty useful. And of course, every type of run triggers the expose. So even an account siphon will also trigger her ability. So obviously we want to play account siphon for this reason. And of course, things that trigger off another HQ access, something like emergency shutdown, is also really nice, something that you might be considering in Silhouette as well. Now, I see a lot of people thinking about adding something like a feint, which allows you to bypass 2 eyes, but then you cannot access any cards from HQ. I tried to play feint, but I feel like you only would play it in order to make to trigger her ability of exposing a card. So if you're doing that, why aren't you playing something like an infiltration? Because that's basically already exposes a card immediately. Of course, if you're playing it like a daily quest, or if you still want to use need the access on HQ anyway, you might be still playing feint, but maybe just something like a inside job is better than feint, because feint is just can be used in this very specific way. It costs 2 credits for I don't know, man. I didn't feel I got the value out of feint, even though it's a very, very cool card. And the thing is, like, with Silhouette, if you really want her ability, if you really want to have this kind of expose on a stick, then you can just play like an Andromeda and play Lemuria Codecracker, which is basically Silhouette's ability that costs an additional click and an additional credit. But it allows you to expose a lot of cards if you really want to. So I don't know. I still don't really know how to use Silhouette, how to exploit her ability, how to make this kind of exploitation of her ability fit into the 40 card deck. That's something very difficult to figure out right now. I'm thinking a lot about this, and every time I see a Chaos Theory deck coming around, I'm also trying to turn it into a Silhouette deck. It often fails, because Silhouette just doesn't have the card draw and the tutors that the Shapers have. But maybe one day we're going to figure out something with Silhouette. If you want to experiment with Silhouette again, here are some observations I had myself when playing with her that I think might be kind of like the key to unlock her ability. And that's the fact that with Silhouette, it's a very good target for the expose is actually not some kind of agendas in your servers, but the eyes in front of the servers. So you can run on HQ. The corporation might not rest the eyes in front of HQ because they're afraid of the account siphon. That's kind of like the Stephen Woolley defense there. Not rest the eyes in front of HQ until you see an account siphon. So you get through the HQ for free, you expose the eyes in front of HQ, and then you know exactly what kind of breaker you need with special order in order to get into HQ, and then you can account siphon. So you kind of can push in an account siphon or other kind of very dangerous card effects, even if the corporation decides to kind of fake you out. Because you know what kind of eyes you have, maybe something like a Forge Activation Order would also work nice, so you can scout out eyes that the corporation can't yet afford, and then Forge Activation Order it to trash it. Or if you know that the corporation can res an ice, but you still want to get in a server, you can like Cortez chip on it to make it more expensive to res, to just push it over the threshold to make that ice not resable, to still get in with Silhouette. So these can be the kind of tricks that Silhouette can pull off. Again, something that we have to experiment with, I think. It might be difficult to get all those tricks again into the 40 card limit, but I think recently we saw an interesting card, which is the Eater. Which, it's just one breaker that you play, and with Eater, with enough money, you will get into R&D HQ anytime. So you can kind of like trigger her ability with Eater every time. So this might be a good combination here. Again, something that we have to experiment. Eater, at this point where I'm recording this video, just came out. Might be something that works well with Silhouette. So yeah, Rihanna, Silhouette, kind of like a difficult runner. She still works. I mean, you can take a standard Andromeda deck, shave off some cards. You don't need as many cards because she has less cards. So the probability that you draw the cards that you need is higher. You can play her. She's slightly slower than Andromeda at the beginning. Her expose ability gives you sometimes surprising capabilities to get into servers that Andromeda would otherwise have troubles with. But the meta is still working on Silhouette, still trying to wrap their head around Silhouette. She's kind of like not very popular at the moment, and I think we can do better. I think her ability can be somehow leveraged in some way to make her a viable runner again. And I still believe that Expose is actually a very, very important ability that we should figure out how to employ on a regular basis. Maybe the modern Breaker Suite of Grail Eyes is something that Expose effect will work much better against. Let's see about that. Let's try to make Silhouette work in the future so she may at some point hack the planet.